Diet Coke is not for weenie. Hi friends, welcome back to another pizza party. I'm Mrs. Pizza and we are here today to do a recent reads. Why? Because if I wait too long, it's too many books. It's overwhelming. So I like to do this while it's a little bit short. So we've got a nice crispy Diet Coke happening because I need caffeine. Cheese has got the zooms. This is gonna be fun. We're just gonna have chaos happening behind me, but what's new? This is just my life. All right, let's talk about some books. Oh, in case you were wondering, the big one. You can see her tail wagging. That's Winnie. And the tiny one, the terror, that's Cheese. I literally can't focus. She's having too much fun. All right, let's talk about some books. The first book we are going to talk about is This Will Be Fun. I picked this one up because it said it was a cozy adventure, fantasy, romance situation, and all of those buzzwords drew me in. I love those things. Unfortunately, I ended up giving this 2 stars and will be putting this bad boy in a free little library because maybe it'll make someone else happy. We just got back from taking her on a walk. Like, she should be exhausted. And instead, she's hyped. You're a destroyer of worlds, my tiny friend. This is the product of 3 separate authors collaborating together, and I feel like that's 2 authors too many. I also feel like, and I don't know this for sure, I'm going on my personal feelings, my personal vibes. This felt like people that had never written a fantasy, they'd never even read a fantasy book before. I'm pretty sure the only fantasy that they've ever encountered was Shrek. Hello. This was giving off a lot of Shrek vibes, but not in a successful way, not in a good way. This is the story of a group of friends that in the beginning of this book are going on a great big adventure to save the world from some giant big bad situation. They are successful, but there is some fallout at the end of this adventure, along with the death of the leader of the group. So originally there were 4 people, there are now 3 people left behind, and we are doing a time jump some point in time in the future. I forget how many years it's been, but it's been a while, a decade. It's been 10 years that any of these people have even spoken to each other. The ending of this great adventure just completely tore them apart. So now, a decade later, all of these heroes have to get back together for reasons and are rehashing old feelings, old trauma, old drama. I'm trying to describe this in a way that makes sense, but we have one of all of these 3 people that is left. One of them has gone on to become famous and use that fame from the notoriety from this adventure that they went on with their friends to then parlay that into sponsorship deals. The other 2 members of the group have kind of gone off into seclusion. One got married and is now going through a divorce, and the other one literally climbed up into a tree and never came down. But a decade later, they all have to get back together for reasons, and getting back together opens old wounds, starts new conversations. We have 2 separate romantic lines happening in this. One is sapphic, the other one is more of like a second chance situation. None of them ever really felt important to me, and I think it can be done successfully in a book having more than one romance storyline happening. But in this, there wasn't a lot of success in either storyline, and I wonder if we chose one and stuck to it and maybe split the story up into 2 books, if I would be more invested in some of these characters. That being said, this world wasn't really well thought out. It felt like it didn't even feel like they did not spend a lot of time explaining magic systems or even some of the smaller things. They talk about things that sound like cell phones, but they refer to them as tapestries. Similarly with like TV shows being viewed on tapestries, I don't know what the hell that means. And you did not describe it to me. Are they literally staring at a piece of fabric? Like, do they have a cell phone and they just call it a tapestry? What is this? Spend the 10 seconds to explain some of these magic things that are happening in this world. By the time we got to like the 3rd act conflict, I was no longer invested in this world at all. We literally get in a limo and go to Vegas at one point. Like, this is such a cluster. I've read lots of books that do that fairy tale mixed with modern day, that Shrek kind of world very, very well. And this was definitely not one of them. I feel like there were too many cooks in the kitchen and whatever came out of the oven was not well baked. If you're looking for something that gives that like Shrek 2 fantasy romance, pick up The Kingpin of Camelot by Cassandra Gannon, or really anything in that series. I think it's called the Not So Fairy Tale series or something like that. But The Kingpin of Camelot is by far the best book in the entire series. You can read it without reading any of the other ones, but it is like a fantasy that has that. We are living in kind of a modern day place, but it has fairy tale elements that are explained. There's TVs, but there's also magic toadstools. There's cell phones, but you can also ride on a flying horse. And it's described well in a silly good time. The next book I picked up after that was Haunt Sweet Home. And this one, again, wasn't that much of a hit for me. It was better than the last one though, but not by much. This I also ended up giving 2 stars. This is the story of Mara, and she is a 20-something woman who is kind of at that point of her life where she's floundering. She doesn't know what path she wants to take. She doesn't know what she wants to be. She doesn't know how to get there. She feels like an outsider in a lot of ways, including in her own family. When one of her cousins has this like TV show that he's the host slash main personality of, and she ends up getting a job as like a production assistant on the night crew of this TV show that her cousin works on. The TV show itself has a really cool premise, and I would totally watch the hell out of that TV show. It's about these people that flip haunted homes. So these people buy homes that have some sort of haunted history. And so it's a little bit of like Ghost Hunters and a little bit of, what is the name of that? Like Fixer Upper? I would watch that show. Honestly, I can't believe that show doesn't exist. But Mara is working nights on this TV show where, you know, the magic is all gone. She knows what's going on behind the scenes when she might start encountering a real ghost in the situation she's in. I will say I thought that the ghost element and the horror elements in this were going to be a little bit stronger. This is not a horror book. This is a coming of age book that just happens to have some ghost stuff happening. It's not the least bit scary. The ghosts are kind of heavy-handed metaphors for things, and I really didn't understand what kind of lessons we were supposed to be learning. I know that Mara is supposed to be growing and finding herself and finding her place in the world, but I don't understand. I didn't get it. I didn't like this. I didn't get it. I gave it 2 stars. It was short, so it has that going for it. The next book I picked up after that was The Lover, and this is by an author that I've really enjoyed in the past. This is incredibly short and feels like a fairy tale, but one that you haven't heard before, but it has all the elements of something. It feels like a fairy tale, and I'm pretty sure you know what that means. Right, Winnie? This is the story of Judith, and she and her sister live in a small town. Judith is the less special of the sisters. Her sister Alice is the beautiful one, and Judith is kind of the secondary sister. She gets treated more like a housekeeper and a maid than she does an actual member of the family. When one day a very attractive hunter comes to town, and Judith sees him with hearts in her eyes, but who does he choose? He chooses Alice. Soon after, Judith's heart is broken by the fact that Alice is chosen yet again. Another stranger comes to town, and he is seen as a vagrant, not necessarily treated well, but has some sort of draw towards our Judith character. This is a story. It's a fairy tale. There's lessons to be learned. There's forbidden desires. There's people taking advantage of other people. Judith makes some pretty awful decisions, but it's so short. It's very like sensual yet quick. It's like a very sensual fairy tale is how I would put this. And it has that dark edge to it, those darker corners, and that kind of dark ending that a lot of fairy tales happen to have. If you enjoy this author, I think you'll enjoy this short story. And if you like things that feel like a fairy tale. The next books I picked up after that, I actually picked up 5 novellas in a series that was called the Under the Mistletoe collection from Amazon Exclusives. This was, I think you knocked a book down and it spooked cheese. This is a group of well-known romance authors who Amazon all got together and got some short stories from. You can listen to these as audiobooks as well as read them on Kindle Unlimited. I read all of them so that you don't have to. And if you're interested in hearing what they're all about, go watch that video. I talk about all of them. But the one that I am going to talk to you about is the one that I enjoyed the most. And no surprise, it was by the romance author that I enjoyed the most out of that grouping. And that was Cruel Winter with You. This one I ended up giving 5 stars, but I'm not going to lie, it's probably not a 5-star book. I just was going on how I felt after I finished it. This is the story of Jamie, and she's a pediatrician, and she ends up having to trudge through a snowstorm to her best friend's house. But when she gets there, everyone except her best friend's brother is gone. and his name is Mark. And Jamie and Mark have had a recent argument, tiffed, something that happened that Jamie is pretty sure that Mark never wants to talk to her again. They have a childhood history with each other, and they get snowed in and stuck at Mark's house alone. This was cute because it does a lot of flashing back to a lot of moments when these two were children and younger, what they mean to each other, flashing back to this incident that Jamie had happen with Mark, and, you know, just fall in love and getting stuck together during a snowstorm. I like how Ali Hazelwood writes romance, so it wasn't a surprise that I enjoyed this. It's short, it's Christmassy, and it was a spicy good time. What more could you really want? I continued on with my Christmas romance nonsense with the next book I read, and that was Resting Scrooge Face. This is another romance novel about Christmassy times. I was trying my best to force Christmas upon myself. I have since kind of figured out that Meghan Quinn is just probably not the romance author for me. That's totally fine. If you like Meghan Quinn books, I am happy for you. But there's something about the way this author writes romances that just doesn't quite connect with me. This is the story of Nola, I believe was her name. She is back in the small town that she grew up in. She had her heart broken by a boy named Caleb years before. And here she is trying her best not to run into Caleb. One day when she's trying to duck away because she sees him on the street and she's like, oh, there's Caleb, better hide behind a dumpster. She encounters the local mailman who gives her a mysterious letter. She and this mysterious person that wrote the letter start writing letters back and forth. You know pretty quickly that this is an orchestrated thing where Caleb and Nola are writing letters back and forth. The mailman and maybe some other members of the community have orchestrated this, but Nola and Caleb don't know they're writing to each other. They form a connection through letters. That is another reason I picked this up. I am a sucker for the letter writing trope in romance novels. This book was absolutely fine. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I think the letter writing element did that, gave it the 3 stars for me because, again, sucker for letter writing. I felt like this really suffered from as short as it was. This was just a novella, and I felt like if we had more time with these characters, we could have, not moved as fast from hating each other back to loving each other again. This was just missing some meat, and I needed this to just be longer. It wasn't bad. I didn't hate it, and if you needed something quick that was available on Kindle Unlimited just to get your holiday rocks off, this is available. But it's not a new favorite, and it's probably something I'm going to forget as time goes on. And the last book we're going to talk about in this extremely romance-heavy recent reads, I didn't even realize I had that much of a romance kick going on, was Book Lovers, and this is by Emily Henry. So this is not her most recent release. I think this was 2 books ago, and she has another one coming out, and you better believe I'm going to read that nonsense because I am an Emily Henry fan. She does not miss for me. This obviously was a 5-star because we're going on my feelings. I'm just giving books ratings based on how they make me feel at this point. This is the story of Nora, and she is a literary agent. She lives in New York City, and she loves living in New York City. She loves her job. She loves her Peloton. She's blonde. She wears high heels. She loves her life. But Nora is the girl in the Hallmark movie that would always be the girlfriend in the big city that gets dumped. You've all seen that movie. It's happened 1,000 times before, where the guy goes to the small town, meets some girl there, falls in love, finds the true meaning of life, and ends up ditching his girlfriend back in the big city because, small town life, must be better. In the opening of this story, it's happening once again because this has happened to Nora several times. Her boyfriend dumps her for some woman that owns an inn in a small town, even though his family owns big hotel. He's like a billionaire or something. I'm pretty sure I've seen that movie. Nora, once again, is the girl left in the dust. She then has to walk into a meeting with a book editor named Charlie, who is very attractive but also extremely grumpy and seems to immediately hate Nora. These two have a bristly first meeting together, and then we have a time jump. This story also focuses a lot on Nora's relationship with her sister Libby, who's more of a free spirit. Nora feels like she has to keep pulling Libby back out of these problems, even if she doesn't want Libby to know that she's solving the problems for her. Nora feels like Libby needs to be taken care of. something's off with Libby. Nora's nervous about this, and so when Libby suggests they go on a vacation to a small town in North Carolina, Nora says absolutely, because she's worried about Libby. But when they get there, who does Nora run into but Charlie, the grumpy book editor from the big city, who she had this very enemies-ish, rivals-ish luncheon with before. She thinks they hate each other. So we now have these two characters, both Nora and Charlie, who would be the characters that would be dumped in the romance rom-com movie that we've all seen. It's really refreshing because neither one is going to, like, they're not changing who they are. They're not changing who they are because of the magic of a small town. The small town still has all of the lovely characters and the magic is there, but Nora loves New York City and Charlie really likes his job. Like, these people aren't changing because of the atmosphere they're in. They're just kind of opening up to more. I loved Nora and Charlie. There were some lines in this that hit me in the chest. And though I am not like Nora, there was some moments where Nora said some things where I felt incredibly seen. Where you just have to like take a second and pause while you're reading and be like, good Lord, that was deep. Like, that one cut me. That one cut me a little bit. This, no surprise, 5-star. I love Emily Henry books, and I will just keep picking up Emily Henry books when I'm having a bad day. But that, kids, is our most recent reads. If you had fun hanging out with me and the dogs, I think Cheese has finally calmed down a little bit. Oh yeah, she's tuckered out now. But if you had fun hanging out with me and the dogs, please subscribe. I hope you're reading good books out there wherever you are, and I'd love to hear about them. And we'll see you next time. You guys look real tired now that you've been running around like crazy.